Here's the brief news from the world over this week. The Synod for the Family is underway in Rome with an uneven start. 2 years in the making, Pope Francis has called nearly 300 cardinals, bishops, and lay faithful from around the globe to pray, reflect, and deliberate on the Synod's theme for the next 3 weeks, mainly the vocation and mission of the family in the Church and the world. However, early conversations surrounding the Synod have echoed the same controversial topics that dominated last year's extraordinary Synod. Can divorced and remarried Catholics be admitted to Holy Communion without an annulment? What should the Church's approach be toward gays and lesbians? After several bishops noted concern about what would be discussed during the Synod and the new rules governing it, the Holy Father intervened with an unexpected address to the Synod on Tuesday. He reportedly said, according to the Vatican spokesman, Father Federico Lombardi, that church teaching on marriage is not in question, and that the question of communion for divorced and remarried Catholics is not and should not be the only issue to be discussed. And it appears that the Synod for the Family has become something of a free-for-all. Bishops have issued calls for general absolution during the upcoming Year of Mercy. They pled for the Church to develop a language of mercy for the Jubilee year, and much more. In response to the free-ranging topics raised, Australian Archbishop Mark Calderidge noted that most of his fellow bishops felt bombarded with the speeches lacking an integration or focus. One bishop said listening to the various 3-minute speeches was like watching corn pop. Stuff was going off in all directions. Confused? We'll cut through it all and hopefully bring you some clarity when Father Gerald Murray and Robert Royal join us a little later in the show. And a major leadership shakeup is underway in the U.S. House of Representatives. Just weeks after John Boehner announced he was stepping down as House Speaker, the presumptive GOP nominee for the post, Republican Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, dropped out of the race on Thursday. He was apparently unable to secure the 218 House votes needed to be elected. The other two Republican candidates for Speaker, Representatives Jason Chaffetz of Utah and Daniel Webster of Florida, apparently lack widespread support among their fellow Republicans. The GOP caucus election for Speaker was postponed, as well may be the scheduled October 29th vote by the full House. More on this story later. And doctor-assisted suicide is now legal in California. Signed into law on Monday by Governor Jerry Brown, the measure allows terminally ill patients to end their life via a lethal dose of drugs. Two physicians must agree that the patient has less than 6 months to live, and the bill was opposed by advocates for people with disabilities. They said unscrupulous caregivers or relatives could pressure vulnerable patients to take their own lives. Marilyn Golden of Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund explains.
People should know that where assisted suicide is legal, some people's lives will be lost without their consent through mistakes and abuse. No safeguards have ever been enacted or even proposed that can prevent that outcome, which can never be undone.
Cardinal Sean O'Malley of Boston, chair of the U.S. Bishops' Pro-Life Committee, called Governor Brown's decision a great tragedy for human life that was compounded by confusion among those who supported the law. California becomes the 5th state to legalize assisted suicide, joining Oregon, Washington, Montana, and Vermont. And former British Prime Minister Tony Blair was in the U.S. this week, warning about the growing support of radical Islam. Speaking at the 9/11 memorial on Wednesday, Blair said, quote, "The conspiracy theories which illuminate much of the jihadi writings have significant support even amongst parts of the mainstream population of some Muslim countries," end quote. Blair went on to say that though jihadist ideology was widespread, it was not representative of true Islam. Citing a report by his think tank, the Faith Foundation, the former Prime Minister said that alliances must be made with Muslims who are outraged by the hijacking of their religion by Islamic extremists. Meanwhile, more than 100 religious leaders, scholars, and human rights advocates from around the world are asking President Barack Obama to formally declare the killing of Middle Eastern religious minorities by ISIS a genocide. The International Religious Freedom Roundtable delivered their petition to the president on Monday. A resolution to call the ISIS atrocities a genocide has already been introduced in Congress by Republican Congressman Jeff Fortenberry of Nebraska. It currently has 96 co-sponsors. And a federal appeals court has declined to rehear a challenge in Texas to the Obamacare contraceptive mandate. Multiple organizations, including 2 Catholic dioceses and several Baptist universities, sued, claiming the contraceptive rules under Obamacare violates their religious freedom. The plaintiffs asked the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals to reconsider the case, but the court refused by an 11-4 vote. The Affordable Care Act requires companies that employ 50 or more workers to provide health insurance that includes contraceptive and sterilization coverage, or they can face potentially crippling fines. The court's ruling maintains that the HHS mandate does not substantially burden the religious freedom of the plaintiffs. These groups could now appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. It is expected that the High Court will be considering a similar challenge by the Little Sisters of the Poor. And finally, the Pope has added Mexico to his itinerary for next year. The Vatican confirmed plans are underway for the trip that would include a visit to Our Lady of Guadalupe, the shrine. The only other trip planned so far in 2016 is to Krakow, Poland, for World Youth Day in July. The Holy Father is also planning to visit his native Argentina, as well as Uruguay and Chile next year.